The envelope felt heavy in my hands, not because of the paper it was made from, but because of the silence it represented. It was a thick, expensive, cream-colored envelope, the kind you know contains something important just by holding it. My name was written on it, in my daughter's elegant, looping script, a handwriting I had taught her, guiding her small fingers around a pencil all those years ago. Now, that same hand had written words that had frozen the very air in my lungs. I traced the letters of my name, Eleanor, and I could feel the chill of the words I had read a dozen times already, seeping back into my bones. It was an invitation, but not the kind a mother dreams of. It was an invitation to my only daughter's wedding. And at the bottom, in that same beautiful, cruel script, was a note. Please understand, Mom, for the aesthetics of the day, and to avoid any awkwardness, we've arranged a separate, smaller table for you at the back. Chloe and I want everything to be perfect. I let the envelope fall onto my kitchen table. The sound a dull thud in the quiet of my morning. The sun streamed in through the window, catching the dust motes dancing in the air. And I remember thinking how strange it was that the world could look so normal, so bright, when a part of you had just quietly shattered. I had spent a lifetime building her up, and in one sentence, she had decided I was worth nothing. Little did I know, that very judgment would become the foundation upon which I would rebuild myself, and the reason she would one day stand on my doorstep, her perfect world crumbling, needing everything from the mother she thought was nothing. My life with Chloe had not always been filled with cream-colored envelopes and silent rejections. There was a time when our world was painted in the bright, messy crowns of childhood. I was a single mother from the time she was 7, after her father, Michael, decided the responsibility of a family was a weight he no longer wanted to carry. He left one Tuesday with a suitcase and a promise to send money, a promise that faded as quickly as his memory in our lives. So it was just us. Our world was a small 2-bedroom apartment that always smelled of laundry and whatever simple meal I had managed to cook after a 10-hour shift as a receptionist at a dental office. I remember the sound of her laughter echoing in those rooms, a sound I worked tirelessly to protect. I sewed her Halloween costumes until my fingers were sore, turning her into a princess or a butterfly with scraps of fabric and sheer will. I packed her lunches, always with a little note on a napkin, a smiley face, a heart, the words, "I love you." They were small things, but they were my entire vocabulary of love. Money was a constant, whispering worry. I learned to stretch a dollar until it felt like taffy. I became an expert at finding sales, at patching knees of jeans, at telling her that a special night was building a blanket fort in the living room and eating popcorn for dinner. I saw the way she'd sometimes look at her friends who had bigger houses, newer toys, parents who drove shiny cars. A subtle yearning would flicker in her eyes, a longing for a life I couldn't give her. I'd feel a pang of guilt so sharp it took my breath away, and I'd double my efforts, taking on extra typing work at night, just to buy her those specific brand-name sneakers she wanted so badly, to see that flash of joy on her face. I thought I was giving her strength, teaching her the value of hard work and simple joys. I didn't realize I was also planting a seed, a tiny hidden notion that what we had wasn't enough, that I wasn't enough. As she grew into a teenager, the divide widened. It was no longer about toys, but about social status. My old, reliable sedan was an embarrassment when I'd pick her up from school. She'd slide into the passenger seat, slumping down, hoping her friends wouldn't see. My clothes, sensible and worn, were a source of quiet shame for her. She started correcting my grammar, my pronunciation of certain words, as if sanding down my rough edges would make me more presentable. I'd laugh it off, my heart squeezing a little, telling myself it was just a phase, that all teenagers were like this. I was so proud of the smart, ambitious young woman she was becoming, I was willing to overlook the small cuts if it meant she would fly. And fly she did. She won a scholarship to a good university. A moment of such immense pride for me, I thought my heart would burst. I helped her move into her dorm, making her bed with the new linens we'd bought on sale, my hands smoothing out the wrinkles as if I could smooth out the future for her. When I went to hug her goodbye, her embrace was brief, her eyes already scanning the room, looking at her new, more sophisticated roommate, at the new life that was beginning. I drove away from that campus, the silence in the car, a physical presence, both proud and profoundly lonely. After college, she moved to the city and landed a job in a sleek marketing firm. She met Mark, a man with a confident handshake and a family tree with deep, established roots. His parents were lawyers and philanthropists. Their world was one of galas and summer homes. The first time I met them, for a stiff, formal dinner at a restaurant where the menu had no prices, I felt the gap between our worlds widen into a canyon. I wore my best dress, a simple navy shift I'd owned for years, and I saw the way Mark's mother, Patricia, glanced at it, her eyes taking in every detail, from the modest cut to the slightly worn fabric. Chloe, meanwhile, was a vision. She had mastered their language, their manners, the easy way of talking about art and travel that was so foreign to me. She was perfect for that world, and I was a relic from a past she was eager to leave behind. I became my mom, a phrase she'd say with a slightly apologetic sigh, as if explaining a quaint but ultimately inconvenient custom from a distant land. Our phone calls became less frequent, our conversations more surface level. She was busy, I told myself. She's building her life. But in the quiet of my empty apartment, surrounded by the photographs of a little girl who used to think I hung the moon, I felt the distance growing, a slow, quiet erosion of everything we had been. The wedding planning was a whirlwind from which I was conspicuously excluded. I'd hear about it in fragments during our brief weekly calls. "We've chosen the plaza, Mom," she'd say, her voice buzzing with excitement. "The florist is a nightmare, but Patricia found someone who did the governor's daughter's wedding." I was happy for her, truly. Every mother wants her daughter to have a beautiful wedding, but a small, aching part of me wished to be included, to be asked for my opinion, to feel like her mother and not a distant relative being kept apprised of events. Then, the dress shopping incident happened. She called me, her voice uncharacteristically hesitant. "Mom, Patricia has booked an appointment for us at Velvet Rose Bridal. It's this Saturday." My heart leapt. This was it, a moment I had dreamed of. "Oh, Chloe, that's wonderful," I said, already mentally going through my wardrobe. "I'll be there. Just tell me what time." There was a long pause on the other end of the line. I could hear her breathing, could almost feel her discomfort radiating through the phone. "Well, that's the thing, Mom. It's a very exclusive appointment. They have a strict policy about the number of guests. It's really just for the bride and the key decision makers. Patricia and her sister are already coming, and they're limiting it to 2 guests." The words hung in the air, precise and devastating. Key decision makers. I was not one. I was an extra, an overflow. "I see," I said, my voice barely a whisper. "But I'm your mother." "I know, and it's so frustrating," she said, her tone shifting to one of mild irritation, as if I were being difficult about a trivial logistics problem. "It's just how these high-end places are. Don't make this a thing, Mom, please. I'll send you pictures." I didn't make it a thing. I swallowed the lump in my throat and told her I understood, that it was fine. But it wasn't fine. I spent that Saturday cleaning my apartment from top to bottom, trying to scrub away the image of my daughter twirling in front of a mirror, guided by the approving eyes of another woman, while I looked at a grainy photo on my phone. A few weeks later, the cream-colored envelope arrived. When I pulled out the thick cardstock and saw the elegant script detailing the date, the time, the sheer opulence of the event, my initial feeling was of pride. My little girl. Then my eyes fell to the handwritten note at the bottom. I read it once, then again. The words aesthetics, awkwardness, and separate, smaller table seemed to pulse on the page. It wasn't just an exclusion, it was a categorization. I was being formally filed away, like an unsightly piece of furniture to be kept out of the main view. The pain was so acute, it was physical, a cold, sharp blade twisting in my chest. I thought of all the times I had gone without, all the sleep I had lost, all the worries I had carried, all for her. I had given her every ounce of my love, my energy, my life, and in return, I had been deemed an aesthetic inconvenience. I called her. I tried to keep my voice calm, but it trembled. "Chloe, I got the invitation. The note. What does this mean?" She sighed, a long, weary sound. "Lom, don't take it personally. It's just, Mark's family has a certain circle. Their friends are important people. We need to seat them prominently. Your table will be lovely. It's with some of the quieter, older guests. You'll be more comfortable there." Quieter, older, more comfortable? The euphemisms were like layers of gauze, wrapping me up and putting me away. "You're ashamed of me," I said, the words leaving my mouth before I could stop them, raw and honest. There was another pause, longer this time. When she spoke, her voice was low and firm, stripped of all its earlier false cheer. "Look, Mom, this is the world I live in now. It's different. The things you value, the simple life, it doesn't fit here. I love you, but you have to understand how things are. You can't expect to be at the main table. It would send the wrong message." In that moment, the line wasn't just silent. It was dead. She had confirmed my deepest fear. To her, I was worth nothing. The weeks that followed the invitation were a slow, gray march. The betrayal wasn't a single clean break. It was a series of paper cuts, each one small, but collectively agonizing. I became hyper-aware of my own existence through her new lens. I'd look at my hands, roughened from years of cleaning and typing, and imagine them next to Patricia's smooth, manicured ones. I'd hear my own voice with its faint regional accent I'd never noticed before, and I'd cringe. I was an island, isolated by the very person who was supposed to be my shore. The final straw was the phone call about the rehearsal dinner. "Mom," Chloe said, her voice breezy, "just to confirm, you're okay getting a taxi to the country club for the rehearsal dinner? It's a bit out of the way and we'll all be coming from the city, so it doesn't make sense for anyone to pick you up." I thought of the cost of a taxi for a 40-minute drive, a significant dent in my weekly grocery budget. I suppose I can manage," I said quietly. "Great," she chirped, oblivious. "Oh, and the dress code is cocktail attire, just so you know." It was the "just so you know" that did it. As if I were a child who needed instruction. As if I didn't know what cocktail attire meant. I hung up the phone and looked around my small, tidy living room. Every object held a memory of her. The faint pencil marks on the doorframe charting her growth, the worn spot on the sofa where we'd cuddle for movie nights. This apartment, this life I had built for us, was my everything. But to her, it was a source of embarrassment. The pressure built inside me, a quiet, simmering pot about to boil over.
I couldn't go to that wedding. I couldn't sit at my separate, smaller table and smile while my heart broke into a million pieces. I had to make a choice. Would I continue to be the quiet, accommodating mother she could politely ignore, or was there another path?
The decision not to attend the wedding was the most difficult I had ever made. I wrote her a letter, a simple, heartfelt note explaining that I loved her dearly, but I couldn't celebrate her marriage in a place where I was made to feel like a shameful secret. I wished her all the happiness in the world and sent a generous check from my savings, a final, painful act of giving. I heard nothing back. The wedding day came and went. I turned off my phone and spent the day at the botanical gardens, walking among the quiet, resilient beauty of the plants, trying to find some peace. Life settled into a new, quieter normal. The ache was a constant companion, but I was learning to live with it. Then, about 6 months after the wedding, I was going through my old files, looking for my birth certificate to get a new passport. I had a small, wild idea to travel, to see a part of the world I'd only ever read about. In a dusty box at the back of my closet, under a stack of Chloe's old school reports, I found a thick legal-sized envelope I had completely forgotten about. It was from my late Aunt Agnes, my father's sister. She had passed away over a decade ago. A quiet, private woman who had lived in a small town upstate. When she died, her will was simple. She left me a few pieces of jewelry and this envelope with strict instructions to open it when you truly need an anchor, not a lifeboat. At the time, grieving and overwhelmed with raising a young Chloe, I had assumed it was sentimental items, old letters, photographs. It had felt too painful to delve into, so I had tucked it away, and life had moved on. Now, with trembling fingers, I broke the brittle seal on the envelope. Inside, there was no jewelry. There were no letters. There was a single, crisp stock certificate and a short, handwritten note from Aunt Agnes. The note read, "My dearest Eleanor, I watched you struggle, and I watched you remain kind. That is a rare strength. I invested a small inheritance I received in a little-known tech company years ago. I'm told it's now quite successful. This is for you. Don't let anyone tell you your worth, ever. With all my love, Agnes." I looked at the stock certificate. The company name was one I recognized, a household name now, a global giant. My eyes scanned to the number of shares. My heart stopped. I sat down heavily on the floor of my closet, the paper shaking in my hands. The value, it was astronomical. It was more money than I could have ever dreamed of. I was, by a staggering margin, a multimillionaire. I had been a multimillionaire for over a decade, living in my modest apartment, clipping coupons, while my daughter told me I was worth nothing. The irony was so profound, it stole my breath. This was the anchor, not just financial, but emotional. My quiet, unassuming aunt had seen my worth long before my own daughter had forgotten it.
There was no shouting, no triumphant cry, just a deep, settling calm. The discovery wasn't a weapon, it was a foundation. For the first time in months, I stood up straight. I felt a strength I hadn't known was possible. I didn't want revenge. I wanted peace. I wanted a life that reflected my own worth, not someone else's estimation of it. My plan was quiet, dignified, and methodical. First, I contacted a financial advisor, a kind, older woman named Sarah, who spoke to me with respect and patience, not pity. We met in her calm, sunlit office, and I showed her the certificate. Her eyes widened slightly, but she maintained her professional composure. "Eleanor," she said gently, "this changes things." Together, we formed a plan. We would slowly, carefully, diversify the assets. There was no rush. This wasn't about flashy spending. It was about secure, intelligent stewardship. Then I made a list. It wasn't a list of extravagant purchases. It was a list of freedoms. I paid off my mortgage, a simple, profound act that made my home truly my own. I set up a generous, automatic donation to a local women's shelter, a place that had helped a friend of mine years ago. I contacted a real estate agent and found a beautiful, comfortable cottage by a lake a few hours away. It was peaceful, with a large garden and a view of the water. It was the opposite of the city, the opposite of the world Chloe and Mark inhabited. It was for me. I didn't tell a soul. I went about my life as usual, going to work, shopping at the same grocery store, but inside, a quiet revolution was taking place. I was no longer the woman who had been cast aside. I was a woman building a new, beautiful life on her own terms, anchored by a secret truth that no one could take from me.
It was a rainy Thursday evening, over a year after her wedding, when the doorbell rang. I was packing a box of books for the move to the lake house, which was scheduled for the following week. I wasn't expecting anyone. I opened the door, and there she was, Chloe. She was drenched, her expensive coat clinging to her hair plastered to her face. But it was her eyes that shocked me. They were wide, red-rimmed, filled with a raw, desperate panic I had never seen before. "Mom?" she choked out, her voice breaking. "Oh, Mom, I'm so sorry. I'm so sorry." She stumbled forward and collapsed into my arms, sobbing, great, heaving sobs that racked her entire body. I held her, my own heart a confused storm of maternal instinct and fresh pain. I led her inside, sat her on the sofa, and wrapped a blanket around her shoulders. I made her a cup of tea, the same way I had when she was a little girl and had scraped her knee. The familiar, comforting ritual filled the silence. It took her a long time to find the words. The story tumbled out in broken fragments. Mark's family's fortune, it turned out, was built on a precarious house of cards. His father had been involved in risky, unethical investments that had recently collapsed very publicly. There were lawsuits, frozen assets, and a mountain of debt. The shiny, perfect world had imploded. Mark was devastated, directionless. Their own savings were wiped out, their credit was destroyed, and the bank was foreclosing on their lavish apartment. "We have nothing, Mom," she whispered, staring into her teacup. "Nothing. All of Mark's so-called friends, Patricia's friends, they've all disappeared. They won't return our calls." She looked up at me, her face a mask of shame and terror. We need a place to stay, just for a little while. Just until we can figure things out. We have nowhere else to go." The words hung in the air. We need everything from me. The mother she had deemed not good enough for her main table was now her only refuge. I looked at her, my beautiful, broken daughter. I felt no gloating satisfaction, only a deep, profound sorrow for the path she had chosen. I took a slow, calm breath. "Chloe," I said, my voice even and soft, "you can stay here tonight, of course." A flicker of relief crossed her face. "Oh, thank you, Mom, thank you. I knew you'd—" I held up my hand gently, but I continued, "There is no we. This is a one-bedroom apartment. There is room for you, my daughter, in a time of need, but not for Mark. Not after the way I was treated." Her face fell. "But Mom, he's my husband. We're a package deal." "No, Chloe," I said, my voice still calm but firm as steel. "You made your choices. You chose a world where I didn't fit.
You chose to value his family's name over your own. You can't now come back and pick and choose which parts of me you need. You need my home. My home has rules. And the first rule is respect. She stared at me, stunned by my quiet resolve. This wasn't the accommodating, pliable mother she remembered. Then her eyes fell on the half-packed boxes scattered around the room. She saw the real estate brochures for the lake house on the coffee table. Her eyes widened in confusion. What is all this? Are you moving? Yes, I said simply. I bought a new house. By a lake. You bought a house? She repeated, as if I'd spoken in a foreign language. How? How can you afford that? I looked at her, right in her eyes, letting the silence stretch for a moment, allowing the truth to dawn on her. It turns out, I said, my tone not boastful, but merely factual, that your great-aunt Agnes left me some stock in a company. It did quite well. I've spent the last year getting my affairs in order. I saw the realization hit her. A physical blow. Her face went pale. All the pieces were clicking into place. My calmness, my refusal to be cowed, the moving boxes, the new house. I had not been struggling in silence. I had been thriving. You have money? She whispered, the words barely audible. All this time? Not just money, Chloe. Security. Peace. The things you and Mark thought were so important were just paper. They blew away. What I have is real. It's an anchor. She began to cry again, but this time it was a different kind of sob. Quieter, deeper, born of a true and devastating realization. She wasn't just crying for her lost apartment or her ruined credit. She was crying because she finally understood the magnitude of what she had thrown away. She had traded a mother whose love was an anchor for a world that was an illusion, and in the end, she was left with nothing but the consequences of her own cruel judgment.
Chloe stayed with me for 3 nights. They were quiet, strained days. We didn't talk much, but the silence was different now. It was filled with the heavy weight of truth. She slept in my bed, and I took the sofa, a small echo of all the sacrifices I had made for her throughout her life. On the 4th day, a friend of hers from college, someone from her pre-Mark life, offered her a spare room. I helped her pack her small bag. At the door, she turned to me, her eyes clear for the first time. "I was wrong, Mom," she said, her voice steady but filled with emotion. "I was so wrong. I thought their world was everything. I thought you were simple, but you were the strong one all along. I'm sorry I couldn't see it. I'm sorry I was ashamed of the very hands that built me." It was the apology I had needed, not for the money or the house, but for my worth as her mother. I didn't offer her money. I didn't buy her a new apartment. That would have solved nothing. Instead, I offered her something far more valuable. "The offer to come to the lake house for a visit is always open," I said. "Just you. We can sit on the porch and talk. Or not talk. The invitation is there when you're ready." It was an offer of relationship, but on new terms. Terms of mutual respect. I moved to the lake house the following week. My life here is simple, but it is full. I grow my own vegetables. I read. I've made friends with my neighbors. The pain of what happened with Chloe hasn't vanished, but it has transformed. It's a scar now, a reminder of a lesson learned the hard way. She calls me now, once a week. Our conversations are tentative, sometimes awkward, but they are real. She is trying to find her way back to herself without the glittering facade of Mark's world. I don't know if our relationship will ever be what it was, but perhaps it can become something new, something more honest. The moral of my story isn't about a dramatic revenge or a financial gotcha. It's much quieter than that. It's about this. Your worth is not determined by the tables you're seated at or the opinions of those who look down on you. It is a quiet, unshakable truth inside you.
And sometimes the greatest strength is found not in fighting back with anger, but in walking away and building a beautiful, peaceful life of your own, an anchor in any storm.
If this story resonated with you, if you've ever felt underestimated or had your own worth questioned by someone you loved, then you understand how deep that pain can cut. This was my real-life story, a piece of my heart that I shared with you today. Every family has its own drama, its own quiet battles and emotional journeys. If you'd like to hear more stories like this, of love, loss, and finding the strength to carry on, please consider subscribing to the channel. It's a community of people who believe in the power of quiet resilience. And if you feel comfortable, I'd be so grateful if you'd share your own thoughts in the comments below. Have you ever had a moment where you had to rediscover your own worth? Sometimes just sharing our stories can be a healing thing. Thank you for listening. It means more than you know.